Real talk for real people, right here in the Inland Empire. We are 1050 AM, KCAA.
Hello, everyone. Hello, KCA listeners. And I also want to say happy holidays. I'm your host, Kathleen Wells, and welcome. Welcome to the Kathleen Wells Show. Kathleen Wells Show, yeah, that's my show. And today is a special show. You know why? Because we are going to talk about Palestine. We don't normally talk about that on this Wednesday show. I talk about it periodically, but not often. I usually talk about it all the time on Palestine Today. Many of you know that I have Palestine Today on Saturdays at 11 a.m. We've been on hiatus for about, 6 or 7 weeks, and we're going to bring the show back. But we need you to help us bring the show back. So you can go to the KathleenWellsShow.com and make donations. We have to pay for our airtime, and we want to bring the show back. And if you've listened to Palestine Today, and if you've appreciated Palestine Today, and if you've appreciated hearing the perspective of Palestinians from their own voices, please contribute to the show so we can bring it back on air. Well, today is a special show because we have a Palestinian. And I think this is the first time. Oh, actually, I did air a Voices from Palestine on this show. So we've had Palestinians on my Wednesday show before. But this time is a special show because we have a special Palestinian. He is the only son of a Palestinian leader. His name is Salam Abu Sharah, and we're going to speak with him in a minute. And one of the things I'd like to speak with Salam about is the fact that last week, large areas of Gaza was flooded with water as far as you can see, due to torrential rains that had been coming down since last Wednesday. So Palestinians were experiencing their own Katrina. We all remember Katrina and how devastating that was, how dramatic that was. Well, that's what Gaza has been experiencing. And that's something that I want to talk to Salam about when I bring him on air. And in fact, some 10,000 Gazans are reported to have been displaced from their homes. Gazans have been living under Israel and Egyptian blockade, which curbs imports of fuel, building supplies, and basic goods, and makes it impossible for them to develop the basic civil infrastructure to deal with extreme weather conditions. During the storm last week, some of the electricity networks that feed Gaza from Israel were interrupted, reducing electricity to as little as 3 hours a day. Can you imagine operating in the dark without electricity? Can you imagine only having electricity 3 hours a day? Can you even, I can't even fathom that idea. Do you know what I mean? So Gaza has a population of 1.7 million people, and they were experiencing daily outages of 12 to 6 hours due to the fuel shortage following the tightening of the blockade imposed by Israel with Egyptian support. So as I mentioned, today is a special show, and we're delighted to have for the full hour the only son of one of the representatives of the PLO, Majid Abu Sharar, and that is his son, Salam Abu Sharah. But before I bring Salam on, let me mention something. Let me say a few things about Majid Abu Sharah. Majid was born in Dura, Hebron, Palestine, and received his education in law from Egypt, and established and headed the Fatah movement in Saudi Arabia in 1966. He was a member of the higher command of the occupied territories Fatah movement and a member of the Palestinian or Palestine Liberation Organization Central Council and a member of Palestine National Council. Majid Abu Sharah was one of two PLO representatives to meet with U.S. General Walters about peace. That was in 1974 when Arafat made his famous speech at the UN about the olive branch or the gun. Majid was from Arafat's Fatah movement, which dominated the PLO, and he was viewed by many different media outlets and among his peers as the new shining star within Palestinian leadership. Majid Abu Sharah was assassinated in Rome in October 1981. And we're gonna speak with his son. So welcome, Salam Abu Sharah, to the Kathleen Wells Show.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the wonderful and insightful introduction. And thank you for bringing the light into what's happening right now in Gaza. It's very unfortunate, like you said, that 10,000 people so far has been displaced due to the weather snowstorm that took place about 4 or 5 days ago. But aside from the weather conditions, like you mentioned, there's an external elements that created this problem, which made it larger than it's already existing, which is the Israeli blockade that prevented food from coming into Gaza, building materials, construction materials. So basically what we're talking about here is not a Palestinian problem. It's a human problem. It's a problem that all humankind and all people with conscience that should pay attention to and assist in. And like you said, this is a Palestinian Katrina for the Gazans, for the Gaza people. It's unimaginable to see a majority of homes in Gaza being flooded with sewer water systems. This is inhumane, this is unbearable, and it touches the hearts of any humankind, any person with a conscience. This picture should really move people to unite together and just move forward in helping and assisting the people of Gaza.
And yet we're not getting information in our mainstream media, and also I don't think many KCA listeners are very familiar with this catastrophe that is taking place in Gaza as we speak. Our mainstream media here in the West, and even the alternative media, I don't think I haven't heard it mentioned.
Well, yes, it is true. And the reason I think that, now all Americans, they already know that mainstream America, mainstream media is controlled by multinational corporations, Israeli lobby, unfortunately, which they don't necessarily want to have the American people, the average American, to see the truth of what's happening in Gaza and what's happening as far as the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, quote unquote. So I'm not surprised that you don't see that in the mainstream media. And thank God we have shows such as yours and other independent shows that we can speak freely and openly, and we can transfer the picture that, has taken place for decades in our region. And unfortunately, the majority of the time, the American viewer, the average American viewer, gets totally the opposite of the factual that's taking place on the ground. Having said that, I believe your venue, your show, gives an opportunity for those who want to really know the truth, is to tune in, and get the information that they are seeking for. Having said that, the issue of Gaza is not, like I said, it's not strictly related to conditional, to weather issue. It's related to politics. It's related to the fact that Gaza has been under embargo, Israeli blockade and embargo, since 2008. Gaza been destroyed totally in 2008 under preemptive strike. Supposedly, that's what the Israeli side said. as if Gazans, they have, F-16s and rockets and so on. It's barely unimaginable equation that the Israelis always try to put in front of the world, that, there's rockets being launched at Israel, and in return, Israel has every and each right to go ahead and basically kill 1,000 civilians, where Israel only lost 6 civilians. So, again, this is an issue of occupation, an issue of people who want their freedom and seeking their freedom. The occupier in this equation is Israel, and Israel is an occupier since 1948 of Palestine. And since then, the Palestinians been seeking their freedom and independence and the right to live in their own country, in their own state, side by side with Israel. But unfortunately, Israel so far is continuing with its prejudice, discriminatory, racist policy and occupational policy, not only against Gaza, but we're talking about Gaza specifically right now because Gaza is really in a bad shape due to the blockade and due to the snowstorm. So, I mean, for your listeners who have been tuning in, they can assist, they can support through sending, donations through the UNRWA, or UN agencies, and they will get that money through for the needy people in Gaza. And like I said, at this moment, we should look at the issue away from any political views. This is a human catastrophe. This is a Palestinian Katrina, and as humans, we ought to stand with one another. We ought to help one another. And what took place, I believe, in 9/11, many Arabs, many Saudis came in and they donated money for the victims of 9/11. Even during Katrina, many Arabs and Palestinians who live in the States, they have assisted and they have contributed for the victims. So I believe as humans, we speak only as humans here. We're not speaking about people from different regions, across borders, across continents, or across, oceans. No, we're just humans. We have a message of peace, harmony, and living together. And as a result of that, we need to stick with one another as humans. So I hope I did make clarity of what's taking place, and I hope your viewers will tune more on and on to your show and hear more about world issues that they cannot hear about in the mainstream media.
Yeah, they can't hear it in the mainstream media. What I want to say to KCA listeners is that Salam was educated in Europe and in the U.S., and he has devoted much of his life to the liberation of Palestine. And we are speaking to Salam now from Jordan. Isn't that fantastic? Isn't technology fantastic that you are now in Jordan and I'm in California, and we're speaking and we're talking to KCA listeners. And one of the things that we want to inform KCA listeners is that we want to give them a different perspective that they're not getting from the mainstream media about the Israel-Palestine issue. So we're gonna take a break in a few seconds. I know when I hear the music, I know we're gonna go to break. I don't hear the music yet, but I have one more minute. But what I want to say, Salam, is that I want to ask you to sort of give listeners sort of a primer or a foundation as to what is actually going on in Israel and Palestine. So why don't you start, and then when we come back from the break, we'll finish.
Primer, well, if we want to talk about the beginning of the conflict, quote unquote, again, because I don't believe that there was any kind of conflict between Palestinians and Jews prior to the establishment of the State of Israel back in 1948. Prior to that, Palestinians and Jews, because there are Jewish Palestinians who live in Palestine prior to the occupation of historic Palestine in 1948. We never had any problem. I mean, the society was living in harmonious. We lived together. We respect each other's religion, rights to practice, and all that. But after the creation of the State of Israel, after the unjust creation of the State of Israel, which is an occupation of historic Palestine, things start becoming complicated. Not for the Israelis, but for the Palestinians, because they were kicked out of their homes, they were deported, they had to go and live in refugee camps, and as a result, Israel was created. The partition plan that was admitted by the United Nations back in 1947 entitled Israel to 60% of historic Palestine in return of 40% for Palestinians, taking into consideration that back then and still now, the Jewish population was 40% against 60%. So they gave the majority of the land to the minority, and they gave the minority of the land to the majority of the population, which was basically an unfair resolution. But yet, that what took place historically. After 1948, of course, as a normal reaction for people who lost their land, lost their homes, the resolution was rejected. A new war came about in 1967 where Israel took or occupied the rest of Palestine. It occupied West Bank, Gaza, and in 1973 they continuously kept occupying the Golan Heights from Syria and Sinai. So this is a brief of the main historic events relating to Palestinian-Israeli conflict. A lot of Israeli propaganda tends to picture and trying to portray the Palestinians as being the terrorists, the attackers, the ones who are rejecting to live with the state of Israel, and so on and so forth. Of course, if we want to examine facts on the ground, Palestinians are in no position, and I mean in no position in a military power position, first of all, to have anything relating to affecting the Israeli security, in a sense, because Israel has the largest, the fifth strongest army in the world. In comparison to Palestinians, they have AK-47s and pistols, so they cannot inflict any harm, serious harm on the state of Israel. Although, under the UN resolutions and under international human law and international law, as people under occupation, Palestinians under occupation, we have every and each right to resist through armed struggle our occupiers, and those are the Israelis. Anyways, so when the American public, they continuously keep seeing on TV, rockets been launched at Israel, Hamas been launching rockets at Israel, and Israel is the victim. So in return, Israeli F-16s, they go and basically demolish entire neighborhoods on the context that they are defending their security. I think there is something seriously wrong, not with the political picture, no, with the human conscience. If a person thinks that he is entitled to go and kill 1,000 civilian people because he or she, they think it's their divine right to be in that land, and it's their divine right to go ahead and kill anything, anybody, any object that does not agree with them, I believe there's a moral catastrophe here. And this is evident. I mean, this is evident on daily basis. People no longer are able to tolerate, each other. People no longer are being able to listen to one another. It's either my opinion or no opinion. And this is, we're talking in general. Unfortunately, life, for some odd reason, have turned people into such creatures. But when we're talking about the Palestinians and Israelis, again, like I said, and there's no difference about this, because UN resolutions, international law defines Israel as being an occupying power. In 1970, I believe the United Nations declared that Zionism is a racist movement. So when you look at those factors, and then we see Israeli officials telling us well, Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East, it makes me go, I wonder if democracies are all like that. I mean, I see democracy in the States, but I don't see F-16s, going and bombing Mexico or bombing, Canada. It's a democracy. It's the largest democracy in the world. And it is the best democratic system so far that's been created by mankind, is the American democracy. Regardless, there are some flaws, but if we want to talk about the system by itself, it is a very functional collective effort system. Meanwhile, when we talk about Israel and say it's a democracy, I don't think that you can combine democracy with racism, intolerism of others, deporting other people who are not Jewish, for instance. All those elements makes the state non-democratic, unlike what they pretend or unlike what they portray to the mainstream media. So,
and yet, Israel is an ally of the United States. We're going to take a break. When we come back from the break, we're going to talk about the fact that the Palestine Liberation Organization, the PLO, is viewed in the West as a terrorist organization. And yet, I want to talk to you about how it's viewed in Palestine. Also, I want to open up the phone lines when we come back from the break. The call-in number is 888. It's toll-free. It's a toll-free number. It's 888-909-1050. If anyone would like to call in with comments or questions for Salam, please feel free to do so. So we're going to talk about the fact that the Palestine Liberation Organization is viewed as a terrorist organization in the West, and we're going to open up the phone line. So we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back.
PDM Web Solutions is the place to go for all of your web design and online marketing needs. And we're located right by you in Riverside. At PDM Web Solutions, we build websites with an emphasis on business marketing, upgradability, and easy editing that grow with your business and won't leave you boxed in. And now we're offering an extra special. Mention the Kathleen Wells Show or Palestine Today when you come to PDM Web Solutions, and we'll give you a 10% discount. That's right, a 10% discount. Check out our website at pdmwebsolutions.com or give us a call at area code 951-543-7608. You can check out Kathleen's website to see our work, too. That's PDM Web Solutions at area code 951-543-7608. Also, like us on Facebook. That's facebook.com/PDM Web Solutions. Reliable, fast, and creative. That's PDM Web Solutions.
Logos is an online quarterly journal of modern culture, politics, and society, featuring cutting-edge articles on politics, culture, the arts, as well as book reviews and original, often experimental fiction and poetry. Logos fosters critical dialogue on modern society and current affairs by giving readers insight into the events that shape their lives. Logos, critical ideas for the engaged reader. Read online for free at www.logosjournal.com. For information about submissions to the journal, please contact logosonline@igc.org.
Conscience International is an organization specializing in the delivery of medical aid to refugee victims of war and natural disasters. Since 1982, Conscience International has assisted refugees in the Middle East, Africa, the Caribbean, and Asia. The organization is led by Dr. James Jennings, whose life-saving efforts have been acknowledged by humanitarian awards from around the world. For more information and to make a tax-deductible donation to this worthy cause, please visit the Conscience International website at conscienceinternational.org.
Join the conversation now. Call toll-free at 888-909-1050. That's 1-888-909-1050.
ليلي
Welcome back to the Kathleen Wells Show. And we were speaking, my guest today is Salam Abu Sharah, who is the son of Majid Abu Sharah, who is a Palestinian leader, a PLO leader. He was just giving us, KCA listeners, a primer. Because we don't get it in the mainstream media, folks, let me tell you. They don't give us the proper perspective. United States is an ally of Israel, and so we get a slanted perspective. Salam is in Jordan. He's a Palestinian, and he's giving us a different perspective, a different point of view. So, Salam, and also I want to say the phone lines are open. If anyone would like to call in with a question, please feel free to do so. So, Salam, the Palestinian or Palestine Liberation Organization is viewed in the West as a terrorist organization. Address that fact.
Well, it's not an exception to label the PLO back when it was created as a terrorist organization. It's not unfamiliar because if you look back at South Africa, the ANC, the African National Council, was also labeled as a terrorist organization. For a reason, colonizers, occupiers, they tend to always label any movement that resists them to be a terrorist organization. The question that ought to be asked, and asked consciously, is Palestinians and the PLO was created as a result of the Israeli occupation. So it wasn't created just because people, or not just because Palestinians like just to fight for the sake of fighting. No. The PLO was created because the Palestinian people, they needed a representative of their own. They needed someone to speak on their behalf, because back then, and I'm talking when I say back then, back in the 60s, Palestinians were viewed as refugees, as a people without a land. And the Zionist movement worked so hard on doing this through propaganda and through literature, through mainstream media, is that they came to Palestine with no people in the land, and they took the land that was promised to them by God, and they developed this land. So the PLO came as a necessity need for the Palestinian people to have their voice raised, to have their issues addressed by an official entity. As far as how Israel and the West viewed the PLO, if we want to put politics on the side, and if we want to talk human experience, the Americans have experienced their independent battles. The Boston Tea Party, I believe, was an evident one. So they very much relate to the Palestinian struggle as far as that. The Americans were the first to call for the human rights, for freedom of individuals, the pursuit of happiness and liberty. So all those issues that the American founders talk about are basically the issues that the Palestinians have been struggling to get since 1960 until today, because today Palestine is still occupied and Israel is still persisting on occupying Palestine. So going back to the PLO, like I said, the PLO came as a natural reaction towards the Israeli occupation of Palestine. It's whether Israeli, feel that it was a terrorist organization or not. I think we have to go back to the international law and define exactly who is the terrorist. When you occupy somebody's land, I believe you are the terrorist. And when I resist this occupation, I'm the freedom fighter. I'm the one who's calling for my rights. So I hope I did answer to this question. And, in case, viewers, they have some kind of concerns, they can call in, and I'll be very happy to answer to them. But I certainly hope that I answered to this part of the question.
So with the recent passing of Nelson Mandela, talk to me about this issue of apartheid. I think it's important that people, I know that some people proponents of Palestine or proponents of the liberation of Palestine say that this occupation is similar to apartheid. What is your position on this?
Well, it is very much similar by laws. What I mean by that is the laws of segregation, separatism, the laws of dividing people, not having people connected with their family. It happened in South Africa, and it's happening in Palestine. Israelis do impose exactly the same laws that apartheid system has imposed on natives in South Africa. But unfortunately, Israelis are far more creative than that. They went way beyond that by also dividing territories that really belong to Palestinians. They built the wall, which was built back 10 years or 12 years ago, basically dividing the existing Palestine, not allowing, for instance, if you're a Jerusalemite, you live in Jerusalem, now after the building of the wall, you cannot go from one village to another because there's a wall in between, and you cannot enter either territory without Israeli approval, and Israelis will not give you any approval. That's one. Second, for instance, if you want to build your own home on your own land, you're not allowed to unless you get an Israeli building permit, and Israelis will not give you a building permit. But if you were a Jew, coming from Ethiopia, and you want to build in Jerusalem, you immediately will get a building permit, and then you will get a land, and you will build your own home there. So, as far as laws, yes, Israel and South Africa very much similar in their mentality, in their applicable of the laws. Plus, one thing that the world has to remember: when South Africa was under a world embargo, the only country in the world that was allying with South African apartheid system, it was Israel. And now, during the Nelson Mandela's funeral, if you watch the news, the Israeli Prime Minister did not attend the funeral. And that tells you a lot. That tells you a lot about the entire picture. Talking about, South Africa and Nelson Mandela, we have to pay a huge respect for this man who has given his life for the cause that he believed in. He spent 27 years in prison, solitary confinement. That alone by itself, coming out the way he came, forgiving his, basically the people who put him in prison, that by itself a very heroic, selfless act. And I think Palestinians and Israelis, have to take the Nelson Mandela experience and try, for the Israelis, try to take the lesson from that, hoping that one day they will realize that this land does not belong to one people. It belongs to all the people who live in that region. And this has to be shared. Because, again, if we looked at the apartheid system, no one would have imagined that it would have collapsed. If we looked at many political situations in the world from 1990 until one, the Soviet Union collapsed, the Eastern Bloc collapsed, now we're seeing many changes. So things do not certainly stay the way they are, Things constantly are changing. And Israel is constantly in a world isolation. It's consistently being isolated, being criticized by the European Union, even by the United States. So I think they should take the lesson of the South African struggle against apartheid and realize that sooner or later they're going to have to pull out from all the territories they have occupied, and the Palestinian people have to get their freedom, if not through peaceful means, then it's through legal means. And as a member, as Palestine now is a observing member at the United Nations, we have the full right to take Israel to the international court and sue them for war crimes committed on daily basis against Palestinians.
Did you say we have a call? Okay. Okay, let's take a call. Elizabeth, hi, how are you?
Hello.
Hello, how are you, Elizabeth?
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, thank you very much for taking my call and for this excellent presentation. Would you mind if I went back to that issue when Israel was bombing Gaza in 2008 and 2009? Israel said it was because of rockets. May I discuss that for a second?
Yes, go ahead. Yes, of course.
Well, actually, what happened, and I'm hoping your guest will discuss this, is that Hamas and Israel entered into a truce, a 6-month truce, in June of 2008. And one of the things what Hamas agreed to do was to stop the rockets. And it was very successful, and it did that. But Israel kept no part of its agreement. It immediately breached all 3 things, and the last of which was that it was not to enter into Gaza and have any military incursions there. And on November 4th, 2008, that's exactly what it did. It came in to Gaza, despite that there were no rockets at all, and killed 6 Palestinians on the false allegation that they were going to try to go through a tunnel to kidnap an Israeli soldier. There was no evidence of that. But the important thing is that there were no rockets. And all of that is a lie. It wasn't until after Israel began began its attack and killed these 6 members of Hamas, that finally Hamas did retaliate with rockets. Hamas and the Palestinians in Gaza have never, ever sent rockets without immediately being preceded by Israeli killings of Palestinians. How do you feel about that, sir?
Well, I totally agree with you. Apparently, you're very well informed, and I don't want to go through that many details because I don't want to, the viewers maybe to get a bit confused. But you're absolutely right, 100%. What you described is basically what took place. But the question that poses itself again and again is why there are rockets being launched at Israel. Let's say Hamas did. Why is that? Isn't that because there's an occupation? Isn't that because each and every Gazan is basically controlled by air, by land, under land, by sea, by Israel? Imagine you are being at your home, not being able to leave your house, not being able even to dug underneath your house and go get some goods from the supermarket. I mean, what would be your reaction just as a simple human being, as an individual? So can you imagine if that is imposed upon 1.5 million Palestinians living basically in a Gestapo, in a jail, in a big jail? The least is for Israel to come to realization that in the end, no matter what, the problem is with occupation. The problem is not with rockets. The problem is not with any security breaches. The problem exists with the mentality and with the politics of the State of Israel, which is to continue its occupational policy against Palestinians. And I'm telling you, and this is not only my individual opinion, but it's the opinion of the majority of Palestinians, is the problem is the occupation. Leave us alone. Let us live in our own homeland, and let us deal with our internal affairs. And this is a simple thing. I mean, this is any human being would like to have. Just live in dignity, being able to go pursue happiness, to pursue good job, to put food on table for his and her kids. This is basic needs. So again, I do agree with your description about what took place in Gaza. And what I would like from other people to think about, why would anyone wish for themselves such a miserable life? I mean, did Gazans choose to live like that? No. Their way of life is imposed on them by Israel, because you cannot, like I said, you cannot even get a can of milk inside of Gaza without Israel allowing it to go in. And sometimes they will let some poisoned goods going into Gaza and West Bank just to, to kill Palestinians, basically. It's a genocide against humanity. So I do agree with you, and I wish that more people would be as much as informed as you are. And I think by tuning in to this show and other, public shows would help people to understand. After all, we are all humans. We are not that much different from one another. We share the same values. We share the same vision of life, of a better life for each and every individual. So why make life so complicated? I mean, why Israel has to consistently deny Palestinians their right of freedom and independence? Why is that? Under conditions that unrealistic to humankind, to human brain, to human intelligence. I thank you for your question, and I wish more questions like yours would come in.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Did he answer your question?
Yes, he answered it beautifully and fully. Could I ask another?
Sure.
Are you aware that a joint study was done by the Tel Aviv University and a European university determining who was responsible for the ceasefires, the breaches of the ceasefires, who caused the agreements between the Palestinians and the Israelis to end? And this study had nothing to do with the Palestinians. Did not do this study. The result was that it was Israel who was responsible for 79% of the breaches, and 79% causing the breaches of the agreement. And it was published in Huffington Post in 2009. Are you familiar with that?
Actually, I heard of that, and I also heard of their own, and Israelis, they had their own committee. It was a judge, I just forgot what's his name, and basically the state of Israel admitted to committing war crimes in Gaza. And a UN investigation team came in, and they, basically they blamed both Hamas and Israel, which I think is totally unobjective. But if you go back to history, back in 1982, Israel invaded Lebanon under the context that they wanted to kick out the PLO out of Lebanon. Prior to their invasion, it was Menachem Begin. He was the Israeli prime minister. In a statement, he said, any harm shall be inflicted on any Jew around the world, we will invade Lebanon and we will kick out the PLO. Right after his political statement, in a few months, Israeli ambassador in London had an assassination attempt on his life. He was not killed, he was not injured, he was not wounded, nothing, And then later on, they found out it was all fabricated, that there was actual no attack on his life, there was no assassination attempt on his life. But Israel used that action by itself to go ahead and invade Lebanon. In the end, and unfortunately, this is very unfortunately, that countries with power, basically they can do whatever they wish to do. Maybe sometimes they are concerned about public opinion, sometimes they're not. But in Israel, I believe, unfortunately, that they don't really care about the internal opinion as much as they care about the external, which is a catastrophe because they're controlling the media as a whole, in each and every country that is really important to decision making, they control the media there. So to them, it's a good thing, like the movie Wag the Dog, to produce a picture that they are the victim and we are the oppressors, which doesn't make any sense. How can you be under occupation and be an oppressor and you can, inflict harm on the fifth largest army in the world? It's just simply ridiculous. But I think they've done an excellent job in portraying this to the entire world. And I believe now it's time for us, Palestinians, with the help of Americans like you and Americans like Kathleen and all those who believe in the human dignity and a human right, is to address those issues, is to make people aware of those issues, that in the end, in the end, Palestinians, they don't want to throw Jews in the sea. It's ridiculous. We want to live together peacefully. But that cannot happen under Israeli occupation. It simply cannot. And it will not. No matter how long this is going to take, it will not. Because as you do not accept anybody coming into your house and dictating to you what you need to do and what you need to dress and the education system you need to receive and the medical attention that you need to take, we simply refuse that. Because Israel basically, even now, even during the negotiations, just now on the news, an Israeli special force, they went into Jenin refugee camp. They killed 1 person, wounded 8. This is unbearable, imagine this happens on daily basis to an average American. Will they be able to tolerate this? I don't think so. And I think the entire world has changed. Now the Syrian conflict it's evident now that the international law is taking its lead. Why not implement the international law concerning the Palestinians? There is 65 UN resolutions concerning Palestine that Israel has totally not followed. Why not implement the international law? Why not the United States, the land of the free, takes that lead in doing so? And Russia is willing to go along with it, actually, and it's calling for it. So I think it's time. It's time. We are the last people under occupation, and we are totally fed up with this. It's been, almost 65, 70 years. 2 generations has been brought up. And this is not healthy. This is not healthy to grow up in a place that you are under occupation, where you are basically subjected to inhumane practices on daily basis. Going from one village to another takes you about 3 hours because there's an Israeli checkpoint. They would let you in, they would not let you in. They might strip you down, they might. It's against anything that the human was born for. We were born as humans to be kind to one another, to help one another. All the divine messages that came upon humankind, it was calling for forgiveness, for loving, for compassion, for being for one another. Why shall we go to the other path, to the dark path, under context that we are the chosen people? I believe that God, the greater power, science, all that, did not choose one people over the other. If that is the case, then there is something wrong with the picture, because after all, we belong to one God. So that's basically, what we need to think as human beings, I believe.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth, for calling in. I appreciate you calling in with your questions for Salam. And if you would love to see Palestine Today come back on the air, please let your friends know that we are asking for donations so that we can make that happen. We'd appreciate it, Elizabeth. Thank you very much for your call.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. So, Salam, that was a great question, and you were able to express your thoughts eloquently on the issue, and I appreciate that. What I want to say to you now, what would you like to say to KCAA listeners? We only have, what do we have? 5 more minutes left, 4 or 5 more minutes. What is the main thing you'd like to say to KCAA listeners? What would you like them to know about Palestine?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you personally and for having me, for giving me the opportunity to speak my opinion and transfer this picture to your viewers and to whoever is interested in listening to it. I would like to thank the managing team on KCAA for making this connection from Jordan to the United States, and for your viewers. I think the simplest way that I want people to look at the Palestinian issue is to look at it from a humane point of view and be very analytical about the news that they hear in the mainstream media. And nowadays, there is no excuse for anyone to be ill-informed, because you have the means to research and be knowledgeable about any subject you want. So you can just Google, whatever kind of issue you are not aware of or you're curious about, and specifically the Palestinian issue. the thing that, viewers have to realize that we Palestinians, like I said, we are the last nation, the last people that is under occupation in the 21st century. And this is a big shame. This is a shame for all civilizations and all countries that they call themselves democracy, is to accept that still today there is people under occupation, and that Israel is occupying those people and is an ally with the land of the free. This should pose a real moral question to you people, that no, we Palestinians view the American people as very loving, compassionate people, that people where great revolutions came from. The American Revolution was inspired by the French Revolution. So basically those revolutions are about the human rights, about freedom, about liberty, pursuit of happiness. And that's what we have in common. That's what all humankind have in common. But unfortunately, we are the last people under occupation. So we share deeply, deeply all those principles that your founding fathers founded this country. And I thank each and every one of them for tuning in. I thank you, Kathleen, so very much for your wonderful show. And I also urge people to donate to Palestine Today show, especially if there are Palestinians or Arabs donating or listening in. You can do a confidential. You can donate
anonymously. Yeah, you can donate anonymously. And do you is there some way that they can contact you? Do you want to give out some information, or is that too, would that be like invading your privacy or something? Do you think?
Well, whoever want to get the contact information, they can get it off the air. I think you do have it. I'll provide it to you.
Yeah, okay.
And I'm welcoming, anyone, any listener, anyone who has any questions, concerns, or anything. I'm very open, very transparent about issues. And like I said, now those days, no one can fool anyone. Everything is out in the open. Everything is out in the open.
Okay, well, we have a minute and a half, and what I'd like to say is happy holidays to all KCA listeners. And regarding the Gaza crisis and catastrophe that is going on right now, please Google it. Google Gaza, Gaza, and find out what's going on there. I think you can even Google like Gaza underwater. I have 1 minute so you can get informed. Well, I want to thank you, Salam, for being my guest today on, I was going to say Palestine Today, but we're on hiatus. This is the Kathleen Wells Show. Don't forget to also, I co-host Roseanne Live with Roseanne Barr on Saturdays on this station at 11 a.m. Thank you, Salam, for taking the time to join me today on the Kathleen Wells Show.
Thank you so much, Kathleen, and I wish every one of you Happy New Year and Merry Christmas to all of you. Wishing 214 would be much better than 213, hopefully.
Okay, thank you, Salam. Bye. It was great speaking with you. Thank you, KCAA listeners, and I'll see you next week. Oh, no, I'll see you Sunday on Roseanne Live. Bye.
KCAA's Inland Talk Express. KCAA, Loma Linda, 1050 AM. The station that leaves no listener behind.
NBC News Radio, I'm Veronica Dela Cruz.